Welcome to the Market Recap, your weekly digest of the biggest market stories from the past week. Join host Anna Serin and financial expert Bruce Campbell as they go beyond the headlines to deliver cutting-edge insights into news that move the market. Proudly presented by the Canadian Securities Exchange.
Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. You're joining us for yet another market recap here on Friday, November 25th, I'm, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host, Bruce Campbell with StoneCastle Investment Management. Thank you for joining me, Bruce.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's a little slower week this week with the U.S. being out for Thanksgiving, though.
It is a slower week. Shout out to our team in Toronto. They hosted a U.S. Thanksgiving in our office. I think it was a huge success, and lots of friends and CSE family were all there. So congrats to them for a wonderful celebration. As you can see, we are finally into the Vancouver November weather. I can barely get enough light in here. I hope the weather out in Kelowna is treating you well.
Yeah, it hasn't been too bad, that's for sure.
Good. Okay, we're going to dive into it. Like you mentioned, it is a bit of a slower week, which is not a terrible thing, Bruce. We're going to talk about the meeting minutes that were released from the Fed meeting last week. We're going to talk about some of the market movers that you're noticing. We're going to touch on the FTX story again because it was just such a grandiose story. We might as well talk about how it continued to play out over the past week. And then, of course, we're going to get into some CSE issuer news. So what was revealed from the meeting minutes of the Fed meeting last week?
Yeah, so the meeting minutes came from the November 1st and 2nd meeting, but they were released on Wednesday of this week. And the interesting thing was, if you remember kind of how everything transpired, was that CPI number came out on the 10th of November. And so the meeting minutes were actually ahead of the CPI release. And the interesting thing is that the several of the Fed people on the board were talking about the fact that they probably needed to moderate the pace of increases, and that they were doing this because of what they were seeing from a slowdown in potentially some inflation numbers, and that inflation slowdown and the higher rates could potentially also lead to a slower economy, and that their baseline now was that there would be a recession sometime in 2023. So the market actually took that as positive. It seems to be at this point in time still kind of shrugging off this whole recession and what the potential recession is. And I think that's because the market feels that it's only going to be a shallow recession and not a deep one. And so it's willing to look, sort of over the valley. And then on the Fed, slowing the pace of increases on rates, that was taken positively. So most people are now expecting that we would see 50 basis points in the December meeting, and then the next two meetings into 2023, we'll see 25 basis points for each of those two meetings. Obviously, inflation numbers will have a big impact on kind of what happens if we continue to see inflation drop like it did. Then who knows what happens, but that's something we'll all be watching very carefully.
Okay, if I remember correctly, and maybe I'm thinking of the Canadian numbers, but the rates have gone up. Is it 6 times already this year or 8 times?
I don't remember the amount or the number of rates, but it's the fastest rate increase in history, right? And right now it's at 3.75 to 4 in the U.S., and it was effectively at 0 at the beginning of the year. And at the beginning of the year, they also were talking about the fact, or a year ago, they were talking about the fact that they felt that they might increase interest rates around 25 basis points for 2022.
Yeah. So it is working, though. We are seeing a slight decline in the CPI numbers that you provided with us, I think last week or the week before. So it's working. Hopefully it continues to work and we slow down increasing those rates. Okay, what are some market movers that we saw?
Well, we've talked about this for a few weeks now, but under the surface, we continue to see a lot of things changing that we haven't seen for quite some time. And when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about kind of shorter term changes. I'm talking about longer term changes. So we look at a lot of different relationships. We look at, the big performer this year and the flight to quality that everyone's looked at, most investors, is the US dollar. We've seen the US dollar continue to deteriorate. And we look at that in multiple different ways. We look at the US dollar on itself. We look at different sectors to the US dollar. We look at different indices to the US dollar. And a lot of them are all showing the same type of pattern where the US dollar is losing its relative strength. So it looks like, you're seeing people move away from the safety of the US dollar and move more to other areas. And as we can see from the overall markets, they've, if you just look at the S&P, it's bumped back up, and it's just, really challenging that 200-day moving average area again. This is going to be a critical area. We have a lot of people watching that. We've got a lot of algos, AI that watch that. And if the market can break above it and hold above it, then, we could potentially start a new uptrend. Right now, it's just at that critical level, and we have to need to kind of watch and see where things go.
The US dollar, that's a big gauge for us, isn't it?
Well, it has been. I mean, just because historically, and really in this case, it's been that flight to safety where people go into your US cash and they hold the dollar. And so as the dollar continues to appreciate, it's been hard for other asset classes to perform. And in this case, it's started to reverse, and it looks like, that could be the beginning of a trend.
Okay, now speaking of the opposite of flight to safety, let's talk about another currency, which is cryptocurrency. Let's move into FTX fallout. So, okay, we talked about this last week. Most people kind of understand a little bit of the story. I saw one news group call it the FTX crypto crisis. It's been coined as the plane crash into a Ponzi scheme. I like that. I thought that was a great title. Just remind our listeners kind of the generality of what happened last week.
So overall, and this came out on the 8th, was the first day that we saw anything on this, was this crypto exchange, FTX, started to have some financial difficulties, and they saw a run on their assets. They tried to do a deal with Binance, that got called off, and then, effectively just, more pieces started to crumble, and we discovered that it looks like it was a huge, fraud, and with no corporate controls, and, it's effectively worthless from $32 billion. So it actually makes it bigger than, some of the other big notable frauds that we know of, being Enron and the whole Madoff fund scandal. So it's pretty big in nature. There's lots of celebrities that endorse this, that were part of this. There's some successful investors that have been brought down by this, including Ontario teachers pension.
Absolutely. So it seems like this week, because they're trying to come back from all of this, because people literally, their accounts, if they had wallets on that exchange, their accounts were showing zero for the holdings in that account. They've recovered $740 million in assets, and this is a variety of different cryptocurrencies that they've recovered. Now, this is a fraction of the billions that have been lost. And the worry is that essentially that there'll never really be a recovery, because again, this is not based on any it's not backed by any asset. This is cryptocurrency. It also looks like we're starting to find out that the founder, kind of what he was doing in the background, and maybe you already understood this, but he was using the capital in people's accounts, and he was hedging bets on other cryptocurrencies. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he was. It looks like he was effectively trying to trade for profit, but he wasn't even successful at that.
No, he was very much not. I think I feel awful for the people that lost money in this. I really do. But I'm really hoping that something good can come from this, and we can create a more regulated system if cryptocurrency continues to exist in our world. So we'll keep watching that story, because I'm sure it'll continue to play out. Okay, we're going to jump into some CSE issuer news. Lots of stuff going on this week on the CSE. So it's perfect week for it to be slow everywhere else. Wanted to mention one of our companies, BET99. They announced today that, that the online sports betting and casino platform, that it finalized a partnership agreement with Major League Soccer superstar Sebastian Giovinco. He adding to the Toronto FC all-time top scorer to its roster of high-profile BET99 ambassadors. BET99 offers premium online sports betting and casino platforms to Canadians, leveraging the brand unique understanding of the country's regional differences to allow to create localized, diverse products tailored to each market. Excuse me. They have a bunch of players that they have joined their team. So it always makes me happy to see kind of these big celebrities come to CSE issuers. So congratulations to them. We haven't seen this in a little while, and we haven't talked about the online betting in a little while. What's your thought on this sector?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's been a lot of companies that have sort of sprung up and are getting into this. If you look at the projections, it's going to be a fairly substantial industry for sure. If you look at what it's like elsewhere around the world, it's a huge sector. So now that it's regulated and allowed in Canada, everyone's trying to, or not everyone, but several companies are trying to jump on that quickly, and they're trying to grow market share and do that as fast as they can, because that's what they found is that, once you attract people to your platform, they tend to stay there, and the platforms with, kind of the most people tend to gravitate more people to that platform.
I think we're also going to see more and more of these physical athlete all-stars join these types of things, because it really is kind of bridging that gap between, physical sports and online gaming, whatever that might be, right?
Yeah, you'll definitely see that, and the endorsements for those athletes and celebrities for sure.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations to them. I also noticed a bunch of financings happening. So as we're watching the markets happen, I mean, obviously, the CSE, we have small to medium cap companies. It's amazing to see how much they're raising during these markets. I just wanted to mention a few. Quebec Nickel, it is raising up to $10 million in flow through and non-flow through shares. That's a nice big financing. Good for them. Reflex announced a capital raise of $4.25 million. Congratulations to them. Again, a nice big chunk. And then Madero announces that it closed a private placement. So extra congratulations to them of over $3.99 million in flow through and non-flow through shares. Also wanted to say welcome to a new listing to Oberon Uranium Corp. They're uranium exploration company focused in Arizona. So welcome to them. Lots going on the CSE, which just makes me so happy. The markets, it seems there's lots going on one week, not the other. We're talking about recession, we're talking about inflation, but all the while, these companies are still able to go out there and raise capital at not terribly dilutive basis, which is always the fear during these types of markets, and keep moving forward on their projects. Is that something that you're seeing as well, Bruce?
Well, we're starting to see more interest in sort of small and mid-cap companies across the board. And so it doesn't surprise me that you're seeing more financial activity where they're raising money, because there's more interest. It seems like the risk appetite for investors is actually starting to change here. And, we talked about that US dollar. We're also seeing it from a breadth standpoint with a lot of the smaller companies, and you'll probably see it with your trading volume on your exchange, that it's started to pick up here in the last few weeks from where it was.
Awesome. Listen, anything we should think about going into next week?
There's a big week next week for economic news. There's going to be a lot that comes out both in Canada and the US, and a fair bit of that will probably have an impact on the markets.
Love it. Well, I can't wait to catch up with you next week and see how that all plays out. Listen, Bruce, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll chat with you next week.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
You too.